Welcome to Science Communication Made Easy. And what is going to be made easy is suppressing the suppression effect, the role of relevance in hypothetical syllogistic reasoning. If you didn't understand the word just stated, that means that you're in the right place. I will shed some light on the seemingly obscure and gruesome title. But let's start with the last word of the title, reasoning. What is reasoning? It is something we do on an everyday basis when we're trying to solve a crime on TV or simply trying to figure out how to get from the point A to the point B in the most efficient way. What goes on in our heads is the process of reasoning which leads us from certain premises or assumptions to a conclusion. It is important what kind of conclusion we reached, since that conclusion presents our current belief on which we act upon. That conclusion can be valid, invalid, justified, probable, or irrelevant. Now that we've clarified the word reasoning, let's focus on the hypothetical syllogistic reasoning. Hypothetical in logic refers to the form if P, then Q, where P and Q present any proposition, such as if something is a bird, then it can fly. Syllogism is a logical argument which consists of two premises and a conclusion that is inferred deductively. Deduction means that a conclusion drawn follows necessarily from the premises, or in other words, there is no other conclusion that can be drawn. Hypothetical syllogism, then, is a logical argument consisting of two conditional premises and one conditional conclusion, which follows necessarily from these premises. Formally, it is expressed if P, then Q, if Q, then Z, therefore if P, then Z. If something is a bird, then it has wings. If something has wings, then it can fly. Therefore, if something is a bird, then it can fly. But is it necessary that something can fly if it is a bird? Based on this argument, yes, it is, because all we assumed are the two premises, nothing more than that. We do not add assumptions such as if something is a penguin, it cannot fly. That is, we do not look at our background knowledge, we just focus on the information presented in the premises. That is the notion of validity. If we assume that all the premises are true, then the conclusion that follows from these premises must necessarily be true as well. Now that we've covered the logic part of the title, let's elaborate on the empirical part, the so-called suppression effect. If we want to know whether people reason according to the principles of logic, we need to test them. Irish cognitive scientist Ruth M. J. Byrne conducted an experimental research in 1989 which showed that people suppress valid inferences. For example, when they are presented with, if she has an essay to write, then she will study late in the library, she has an essay to write, or if she has an essay to write, then she will study late in the library. If she has some textbooks to read, then she will study late in the library. She has an essay to write. People conclude, she will study late in the library. However, if we change one part of the content and we present them with, if the library stays open, instead of if she has some textbooks to read, people opt for she may or may not study late in the library, rather than she will study late in the library, which is the logically valid conclusion. Therefore, people suppress valid inferences, and this phenomenon is known as the suppression effect. Why does the suppression effect occur? According to Byrne, we are taking into account the content, which is, in this case, the fact that the library can be closed. And if the library can be closed, she may not study late in the library. But let's take another one of Byrne's examples. If she meets her friend, then she will go to a play. If she has enough money, then she will go to a play. She met her friend. If we know that there is a possibility that she does not have enough money, we will conclude that she may not go to a play. In other words, we will opt for a logically valid conclusion. However, if we stir things up a bit and shape this argument into a hypothetical syllogism explained earlier, it gives us an opportunity to manipulate additional content and test people's reasoning in a comparable way. So we will change the last premise into, if she goes to a play, then her friend will buy her ticket. And we will offer a hypothetical form of conclusions. What happens now is that people select valid conclusion once again. If she meets her friend, then her friend will buy her a ticket. This is probably because the last part stating that her friend will buy her a ticket compensates for the fact that she might not have enough money to buy the ticket herself. Therefore, people neglect the money part and perceive it as irrelevant when overshadowed by the information that the outcome is nevertheless ticket providing. In other words, people suppress the suppression effect, and this covers the last part of the obscure and gruesome title, Suppressing the Suppression Effect, the role of relevance in hypothetical syllogistic reasoning.